The cruelest lesson in life is not that bad people exist. It is that many good people meet pain before they ever meet peace. They help first, trust first, forgive first, and somehow suffer first. If you have ever looked at your life and quietly asked, "Why does my heart carry wounds I did not deserve?" then stay with me, because there is one small truth hidden inside this pain that changes everything. And by the end of this story, you may understand why kindness is often tested before it is honored. Picture a rainy evening, the kind that makes a city look honest for a moment, and imagine me, a gentleman cat, sitting by the window of an old library with a cup of coffee growing cold beside me, watching people rush through the street below. Among them was a man named Elias. He was not rich, not powerful, not famous. He was simply the kind of person everyone says they admire. He worked hard, spoke gently, remembered birthdays, helped neighbors carry their bags, stayed late to fix mistakes that were not his, and answered messages even when his own mind was tired. In the office, he was the one people trusted with pressure. In the family, he was the one people called when there was trouble. In friendships, he was the listener, the patient one, the bridge between arguments, the hand that reached out first. And yet, if you looked closely, there was a sadness in him that did not belong to one bad day. It looked older than that. It looked like a sadness built slowly, one disappointment at a time. Have you ever noticed that the person who understands everyone is often the one nobody truly tries to understand? That was Elias. He had learned early in life that love could be earned by being useful. As a boy, when the house felt tense, he became quiet so others could stay calm. When money was short, he asked for less. When his mother was worried, he smiled to comfort her. When his father was disappointed, he tried harder. He was praised for being mature, for being easy, for never causing problems. And like many good people, he made a silent decision long before he was old enough to question it. If I become good enough, careful enough, helpful enough, maybe life will be gentle with me. But life does not always reward silent sacrifice immediately. Sometimes it consumes it. Years passed, and that old pattern followed him like a shadow across every stage of life. In school, friends copied his work, then mocked him when he finally said no. In relationships, he gave honesty and received confusion. He listened to promises that were spoken warmly and broken casually. At work, less disciplined people stepped ahead of him because they knew how to be visible, while he only knew how to be dependable. He was invited when someone needed support, but forgotten when joy was being shared. He kept telling himself that goodness wins in the end, but quietly he began to wonder, why does the end take so long for some people? This is the part most people never talk about. Good people do not just suffer from what others do to them. They suffer from the meaning they attach to it. Every betrayal feels like proof that maybe they were foolish. Every rejection feels like proof that maybe kindness is weakness. Every delay feels like proof that maybe the world belongs to harder hearts. So they do something dangerous. They become even better, even more giving, even more patient, hoping that one more act of goodness will finally unlock the respect they have been waiting for. But respect that depends on endless self-sacrifice is not respect. It is dependency wearing a polite face. One evening, after another long day at the office, Elias stayed late to help finish a project that his team leader had neglected for weeks. He corrected errors, rewrote pages, organized the presentation, and saved the deadline. The next morning, the team leader accepted praise from senior management as if the work had been his own. Elias stood there in the meeting room, tired eyes, stiff shoulders, hearing his effort vanish into someone else's name. Nobody spoke for him. Nobody said, "Elias carried this." And something inside him cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to let the truth in. Later that night, he walked alone through the city. The rain had stopped, but the pavement still held the shine of it. People passed him without seeing him. He reached a small rooftop above his apartment building, the place where he sometimes went when his thoughts were too heavy for walls, and he sat there in silence under the open sky. Sometimes the turning point in a life is not a disaster. Sometimes it is the moment a person becomes too tired to keep lying to himself. Elias finally admitted what he had avoided for years. I am suffering not only because people are selfish. I am suffering because I keep offering my goodness without protecting it. That is a painful sentence. But it is also a freeing one. The next day, he visited an older man he respected, a retired teacher named Samuel, who lived simply on the edge of the city where the buildings gave way to trees and open hills. Samuel listened without interrupting. When Elias finished, expecting comfort, the old man gave him something better: clarity. He said, "Good people often suffer first because they are easier to use. They do not attack. They do not manipulate. They hesitate before disappointing others. And the world quickly notices who has a soft heart without strong boundaries." Then Samuel asked him a question that stayed in his mind like a bell. "Why do you think being needed is the same as being valued?" Elias had no answer. Maybe you know that silence. Maybe you have felt it too. This is where psychology enters the story, not as a cold theory, but as a mirror. Many good people are raised to connect their worth with service. They are loved most when they are convenient, praised most when they are quiet, appreciated most when they carry burdens without complaint. So the brain learns a pattern. Safety comes from pleasing. Peace comes from avoiding conflict. Identity comes from being the reliable one. Over time, this becomes automatic. The mind starts scanning every room for emotional danger. Who is upset? Who needs help? What can I fix? What should I swallow? This creates a person who looks strong from the outside, but is often exhausted inside. Not because goodness is wrong, but because goodness without boundaries turns into self-abandonment. And here is the hidden pattern that changes everything. Unhealthy people are often drawn to healthy hearts, not to honor them, but to borrow from them. They borrow your calm because they do not have their own. They borrow your patience because they have not developed discipline. They borrow your forgiveness because they do not want accountability. They borrow your effort because it saves them from growing. Does that mean you should become cold? No, it means you should become conscious. There is a difference. A river gives life, but it also has banks. Without banks, it becomes a flood. A good heart also needs banks. Think about how often people say they want a loyal friend, an honest partner, a kind colleague, a respectful son, a dependable woman, a patient father. Everyone wants to receive these qualities, but not everyone knows how to recognize their price. Loyalty costs choice. Honesty costs comfort. Kindness costs energy. Patience costs emotional strength. So the world praises goodness in words, but often rewards performance, confidence, and noise more quickly than character. That is why good people sometimes suffer first, not because goodness has no value, but because its value is usually understood late. Diamonds are not found in crowds throwing attention at them. They are recognized by people with eyes trained to notice what is rare. Elias began to see his life differently. For the first time, he did not ask, "Why am I always hurt?" He asked, "Why do I keep staying where hurt is predictable?" That question changed the direction of his life. He started with small things. When people called only to unload their chaos but never cared about his peace, he stopped always answering. When coworkers tried to hand him their last-minute failures, he calmly said, "I can help this once, but I will not carry this pattern." When a friend joked at his expense to entertain others, Elias did not smile through it. He said, "Respect matters to me. Speak differently." And something surprising happened. Some people pulled away. At first, that hurt him. He thought he was becoming harsh. But Samuel later told him, "Anyone upset by your boundary was benefiting from your lack of one." That line is simple, but it exposes many relationships. Here is another truth that many people learn too late. When you stop overgiving, you do not lose everyone. You lose the people who were attached to your overgiving. The ones who truly care may be surprised at first, but they adjust. They respect you more. They see you more clearly. And the ones who vanish were never in love with your soul. They were in love with your availability. Still, changing did not make Elias instantly fearless. Good people often feel guilt when they begin protecting themselves. Why? Because the nervous system confuses boundaries with danger. If you spent years keeping peace by pleasing others, then saying no will feel rude even when it is healthy. Speaking directly will feel cruel even when it is fair. Resting will feel selfish even when it is necessary. This is important, so listen carefully. A bad feeling does not always mean a bad decision. Sometimes it is just an old wound reacting to a new level of self-respect. Months passed, and life began to show Elias a different kind of reward. It was quieter than applause, but deeper. He slept better. He no longer replayed every conversation, wondering if he had disappointed someone. He chose friends who asked real questions and waited for real answers. He worked with more dignity because his effort now had shape and limits. He noticed beauty again, the gold of sunset on glass buildings, the calm of morning streets before the city woke, the stillness of mountains during a weekend trip where no one demanded anything from him. Peace was returning, not because the world had become kinder overnight, but because he had stopped handing fragile parts of himself to careless hands. One day, the same team leader who once took credit for his work came to Elias with another urgent mess. This time, Elias listened, then said politely, "I hope you solve it well. I cannot stay late for this." It was a small sentence, but for a man who had spent years translating his exhaustion into politeness, it felt like reclaiming land that had been occupied for too long. The leader looked shocked. Elias walked out of the office and into the evening air with a strange feeling in his chest. Not anger, not revenge. Freedom. Tell me, how many people are waiting for life to change when what really needs to change is the permission they keep giving others? This is where the real lesson lives. Good people suffer first because they often begin life with beautiful values and incomplete defenses. They know how to love, but not always how to discern. They know how to endure, but not always how to withdraw. They know how to forgive, but not always how to require change. They believe the best in others, sometimes before they have gathered evidence. That innocence is not stupidity. It is unguarded hope. But unguarded hope in the wrong hands becomes a doorway for pain. So what should a good person do? First, stop seeing suffering as proof that goodness failed. Pain is not a verdict on your value. Sometimes it is training. Sometimes it is information. Sometimes it is the moment life teaches your heart to add wisdom to kindness. Second, study patterns, not promises. People can say anything when they need access to you. Watch what repeats. Repeated disrespect is the truth. Repeated excuses are the truth. Repeated inconsistency is the truth. Third, do not confuse being loved with being used gently. Many people are not cruel in obvious ways. They are careless, entitled, emotionally lazy. They do not shout, they simply keep taking. A quiet harm is still harm. Fourth, remember that self-respect may disappoint others before it impresses them. Let it. Their first reaction is not your final answer. Fifth, understand that becoming wiser does not mean becoming bitter. A locked door does not hate the street. It simply protects what matters inside. Perhaps the deepest lesson is this: good people often suffer first because they are being asked to evolve from innocent kindness into conscious kindness. Innocent kindness says, "I will give because I want to be good." Conscious kindness says, "I will give where there is honesty, reciprocity, and respect." Innocent kindness hopes everyone understands the heart. Conscious kindness knows many people understand only limits. One is beautiful but vulnerable. The other is beautiful and strong. And strength, when joined with goodness, changes everything. Tonight, if you are carrying the quiet pain of being the one who tried, the one who stayed, the one who forgave, the one who gave more than was returned, do not rush to become hard. Sit with the lesson first. Imagine the gentleman cat on a rooftop at sunset, city lights waking one by one below, tail curled neatly at his feet, speaking softly into the evening air. Your suffering was not proof that you were foolish for being good. It was proof that your goodness needed wisdom standing beside it. The world does not need fewer good people. It needs good people who can see clearly, choose carefully, and walk away when respect disappears. Because the moment a good person learns boundaries, the game changes. They are no longer easy to use. They are no longer hungry for crumbs. They are no longer available to every hand that reaches without care. They become calm, difficult to manipulate, and deeply valuable. And that is when life often begins to respond differently, not because they became less loving, but because they finally learned that love without self-respect invites sorrow. So if you have suffered first, do not think the story ends there. Sometimes the first chapter belongs to pain, but the next belongs to awareness, dignity, and peace. And the people who once misunderstood your softness may one day understand what it was worth, perhaps too late to keep it. If this story spoke to something real inside you, tell me honestly in the comments. Have you ever been punished for having a good heart? And what did it teach you?